Welcome, dear listener, to Sleepy Story Facts, where tonight's sleep story drifts softly outward through the cold and velvet hush of the solar system, past the familiar paths of the planets, beyond the slow blue turning of Neptune, and into a region so distant, so dim, and so wonderfully quiet that even imagination seems to lower its voice before entering. And as this bedtime story begins, you are invited to do the same, to loosen the day from your shoulders, to let each thought become lighter than before, and to follow this gentle bedtime into the long, calm mystery of Planet 9, the unseen world that may be gliding at the dark edge of our celestial neighborhood, far from sunlight, far from hurry, far from the noise of waking life, where facts arrive not as hard points of information, but as warm little lanterns in the night, each one glowing softly enough to help you fall asleep. So before we travel any farther, allow yourself a moment simply to settle in, to notice the support beneath you, to feel how the bed receives your weight without asking anything in return, how the blanket rests over you like a layer of quiet atmosphere, how the air moves in and out with such patient kindness, and how even now this relaxing story is becoming less a set of words and more a slow tide carrying you toward deep sleep, because there is no effort needed here, no need to remember everything, no need to stay alert, only a calm floating attention, the kind that listens the way starlight listens, without strain, without urgency, without end, and somewhere far above the earth, beyond the moon, beyond Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus, beyond the sapphire rim of Neptune, astronomers have wondered whether another great planet lingers in the dark, not yet directly seen, but suggested by the gentle behavior of distant icy bodies, whose stretched and tilted orbits seem to whisper that something massive may be out there, shepherding them with gravity so soft and slow that it feels, in a nighttime story like this, almost like a hand smoothing the fabric of space. This possible world is often called Planet 9, and one of the most soothing facts about it is that it belongs more to patience than to drama, because if it exists, it circles the sun so far away that a single year there may last thousands upon thousands of Earth years, which means that while we measure our days in mornings and evenings, Planet 9 would know time as a vast, quiet breathing, a nearly motionless wandering through darkness, where dawn itself becomes a very distant idea. Imagine that for a moment, not as something lonely, but as something serene, a world so remote that sunlight would arrive only as a faint silver memory, a world perhaps several times more massive than Earth, large enough to shape the outskirts of the solar system, yet hidden so well in the dimness that our telescopes still search for it with the same humble curiosity with which one might search for a candle across a snowy field at midnight. In this calming narration, that hiddenness is not frustrating. It is beautiful, because Planet 9 reminds us that the universe does not rush to reveal itself, and that not knowing can be one of the gentlest forms of wonder, especially at night, especially when the mind is ready to rest. Some researchers think this world may be an ice giant, perhaps related in character to Neptune or Uranus, but cast out into a much colder and darker orbit. And there is a tenderness in that possibility, in the thought of a blue-gray planet wrapped in ancient chill, carrying storms no human ear could hear, moving through a sky where the sun would be only a bright star among stars, not a blazing master, but a small and distant lamp. And because Planet 9 is still a scientific hypothesis, it teaches one of the calmest lessons in all of astronomy, that science can be gentle, that discovery often begins with patterns, with patient watching, with the willingness to notice that distant objects seem subtly aligned when perhaps they should not be, and to sit with that mystery for years, even decades, without forcing it into certainty too quickly. This is one reason Planet 9 is such a perfect companion for a bedtime story, because it lives in the borderland between fact and search, between evidence and dream, between what the universe has told us and what it has not yet fully said. And so, as you continue to listen, you may imagine yourself not racing toward answers, but drifting peacefully through the outer dark, where dwarf planets and icy fragments move like sleepy thoughts at the edge of awareness, each tracing long ellipses through the Kuiper Belt and beyond, while somewhere deeper in that shadowed expanse a larger body may be turning with glacial dignity. Unseen yet influential, hidden yet present, distant yet somehow intimate in the way all night sky mysteries become intimate when heard softly enough. And if your mind begins to wander, let it wander kindly, because Planet 9 itself is a lesson in wandering, a reminder that not everything important glows brightly, not everything real stands close, and not every truth arrives quickly. And so this sleep story, this gentle bedtime passage through the outer solar system, asks nothing more of you now than to rest inside that idea, to feel the slowness of cosmic time, the hush of dark space, the softness of unhurried gravity, and to let the possibility of a faraway planet, quietly circling the sun beyond the reach of ordinary sight, become a peaceful thought you do not need to finish before sleep finds you. Now that the familiar planets have softened behind us like lamps seen through evening mist, this sleep story moves a little farther into the tranquil frontier where Planet 9 is thought to wander. And in this gentle bedtime drift, one of the most relaxing facts to hold in your mind is that the search for this hidden world began not with noise or spectacle, but with patterns, because astronomers noticed that several distant icy objects beyond Neptune seemed to lean their long orbits in a similar direction, as though some calm and heavy presence were guiding them from far away. And that idea alone can feel soothing in a bedtime story. The notion that gravity, which never hurries and never raises its voice, may be shaping the dark with invisible hands. If Planet 9 is truly there, many scientists think it could be several times more massive than Earth, perhaps somewhere around 5 to 10 Earth masses in some models, large enough to influence the outer solar system, and yet still so distant that it remains hidden in deep dimness. And there is something almost dreamlike in that balance, a world substantial enough to matter, quiet enough to escape notice, and patient enough to complete a single orbit in thousands, or even perhaps tens of thousands of Earth years, so that while cities rise and fade, while generations come and go, while seasons turn and turn again, Planet 9, if real, would continue its slow, unbroken curve around the sun, with the serene steadiness of a thought too large to be rushed. In a relaxing story like this one, such timescales are not overwhelming. They are comforting because they remind the mind that not everything must happen today. Not everything must be solved tonight. And not every path needs to be short. And so you may imagine this distant planet moving not through emptiness, but through a wide and silent ocean of old sunlight, where each ray that reaches it has traveled so far that brightness itself seems to arrive sleepy and softened. Out there, the sun would not blaze across the sky as it does on Earth, but would appear more like an especially brilliant star, still lovely, still central, but diminished by distance into something gentler, a faraway hearth fire rather than a noon glare. And under such a small sun, the atmosphere of Planet 9, if it has one, might hold a cold and muted grandeur, perhaps wrapped in layers of hydrogen and helium, or richer ices, perhaps cloaked in clouds too faint for us to picture clearly, perhaps rotating through a darkness where weather unfolds with immense slowness. Another calming fact is that Planet 9 is not merely a fantasy placed into the sky at random. Because the idea has been studied through mathematics, orbital simulations, and careful observation of remote trans-Neptunian objects, which means that this nighttime story rests on the quiet workmanship of science, on equations and telescope surveys and patient comparisons. And there is real comfort in that, in knowing that curiosity can be methodical, that wonder can wear soft shoes, and that the universe sometimes reveals itself by the smallest repeated hints, rather than by grand announcements. Some researchers have suggested that Planet 9 could also help explain the unusual inclinations of certain distant objects, bodies whose orbits seem tipped or stretched in ways that invite the possibility of a hidden sculptor in the dark. And when you hear that, you do not need to imagine anything forceful or dramatic, only a vast gravitational presence, endlessly subtle, gently arranging the farthest pebbles on the shoreline of the solar system. Perhaps that is one of the loveliest scientific images of all. The outer solar system, not as a chaotic wilderness, but as a quiet arrangement whose deeper symmetry we are only beginning to notice, like discovering that a lullaby has a pattern beneath its melody. And because this is a calming narration designed to help you fall asleep, you may let your thoughts float around one especially peaceful truth, which is that unseen things can still be meaningful, that distant things can still shape the world, and that mystery is not always a problem to fix, but sometimes a place to rest. A dark blue room at the edge of knowledge, where the mind can lie down without fear. Perhaps Planet 9 formed closer to the sun long ago, and was later nudged outward during the restless youth of the solar system. Or perhaps it was captured in some ancient gravitational encounter, though these possibilities remain uncertain. And even that uncertainty has a soft beauty tonight, because it means the story of our own cosmic neighborhood is still unfinished, still open, still holding one or two secret chambers where imagination and evidence sit quietly together. So as this bedtime story continues, allow the facts to become slower and rounder and more dreamlike, like small stones sinking through calm water. And picture the great suspected planet gliding along its elongated path far beyond Neptune, far beyond ordinary sight, carrying with it a silence so complete that even time seems to wrap itself in blankets there, while you, safe and warm on Earth, need do nothing but listen, breathe, and drift, letting the hidden mathematics of the heavens become a gentle bedtime rhythm, letting the possibility of a remote and patient world loosen the final knots of the day, and letting the outer dark, instead of feeling empty, become vast and tender enough to hold you all the way into deep sleep, as this sleep story carries us farther into the hush beyond Neptune, where sunlight grows thinner and silence becomes almost velvety. We begin to imagine one of the most soothing possibilities about Planet 9, which is not simply that it may exist, but that it may travel in an orbit so vast and elongated that its journey around the sun becomes less like a lap and more like a slow wandering through an age of stillness, a patient curve drawn over thousands upon thousands of Earth years, so gradual that even the language of motion feels too energetic for it. And in this bedtime story, that is exactly what makes it so calming, because Planet 9, if it is truly out there, would not rush, would not flare, would not demand attention, but would continue with the kind of deep cosmic patience that allows the mind to unclench and soften, as though the universe itself were showing you how to move more slowly tonight. And one of the relaxing facts often associated with this hidden planet is that its orbit may carry it incredibly far from the sun, perhaps hundreds of times farther from our star than Earth is, which means that the warmth and brightness we take for granted here would fade into something pale and distant there, leaving only a dim celestial glow to trace the edges of a world wrapped in ancient cold. And yet even that cold can be imagined gently, not as harshness, but as stillness, as a deep and quiet winter that never needs to end. A place where the black of space is not empty, but soft, like layers of dark silk folding over one another. In such a region, time itself seems to become rounder and more spacious. And that is one reason this relaxing story settles so easily into the body, because Planet 9 invites you to think in broad and sleepy scales, where centuries are like breaths and millennia pass like drifting clouds. And the mind, hearing this, may begin to let go of the ordinary urgency it carried all day. Scientists suspect that if Planet 9 is real, its orbit would not be a neat, simple circle, but a stretched ellipse, which is a lovely thing to picture before deep sleep, because an ellipse feels less like a strict mechanical track and more like a graceful loop, a slow ribbon floating around the sun, drawing near only slightly before gliding back into the great cool distance again. And somewhere along that immense path, this world, perhaps bluish, perhaps gray, perhaps wrapped in frozen atmospheric haze, would turn with unhurried dignity through the outer dark. Another gentle fact to rest beside tonight is that Planet 9 may help explain why certain distant objects in the solar system seem clustered in ways that have puzzled astronomers. And so this possible world becomes not only a hidden planet, but also a quiet organizer, a keeper of pattern, a distant gravitational composer whose melody is heard only in the motions of smaller icy bodies. And there is something deeply peaceful in that idea. That influence can be subtle. That presence can be felt without being seen. And that even in the farthest reaches of the night, there may still be order, tenderness, and form. Perhaps, if you wish, you can imagine yourself floating there now, not standing on a surface, not bracing against wind, but simply drifting in a calm observational silence above that remote orbital path, with no need to arrive anywhere, no need to solve the mystery completely, only the pleasure of accompanying it, because this nighttime story is not asking you to be an astronomer on duty. It is asking you only to be a peaceful traveler, carried by calming narration through a place where knowledge and wonder move side by side like two soft lanterns. And one of the most comforting things about Planet 9 is that it remains uncertain, because uncertainty at bedtime can be a refuge when it is gentle enough. And here it is gentle indeed, not a sharp uncertainty, not a troubling one, but the kind that leaves room for imagination to lie down beside science. The kind that says the universe is not finished speaking, the kind that whispers there are still quiet rooms at the edge of our solar system where new understanding may someday awaken, though not tonight, not urgently, not all at once, only when the time is right. For now, the hidden planet can remain exactly as it is in this sleep story, a faraway possibility moving through the dark with the grace of a secret, perhaps once formed closer to the sun and later cast outward by ancient planetary motions, perhaps always destined for remoteness, perhaps holding within its long cold seasons a record of the solar system's early days. And each of these possibilities can pass through your mind not as problems to untangle, but as soft shapes in the dark, easy to watch, easy to release. And as you continue to fall asleep, you may notice how the idea of distance itself becomes comforting, how the enormous space between the sun and Planet 9 acts almost like a cushion, muting everything, slowing everything, reducing every bright edge into shadow, and every sharp thought into haze, until the whole outer solar system feels like a giant cradle of darkness, rocking almost imperceptibly, while this gentle bedtime voice follows the imagined world along its endless winter path, around and around, not in circles of repetition, but in spirals of calm, carrying you deeper into rest, deeper into quiet, deeper into that serene place where even the farthest planet can feel close enough to dream about, and soft enough to follow all the way into sleep, far beyond the bright inner rooms of the solar system, farther even than the calm blue pathway of Neptune. This sleep story glides onward into a region where the sun no longer feels like a blazing ruler of the sky, but more like a distant ember. And as we continue our gentle bedtime journey toward the imagined realm of Planet 9, one of the most relaxing thoughts to carry with you is that distance can soften almost everything, turning brilliance into glow, motion into drift, and knowledge itself into a kind of calming narration that asks nothing from you except to listen and slowly fall asleep. If Planet 9 truly moves out there in the immense dark, then the sunlight touching it would be extraordinarily faint, thinned by an almost unimaginable journey across space. So that day, on such a world, if day could even be felt in any familiar way, might resemble a dim and hushed twilight rather than anything like noon on Earth. And that image is so peaceful that the mind can rest in it with ease, imagining a faraway planet bathed not in warmth, but in a pale and silvery hush, where every contour of cloud and ice and atmosphere, if they are there, would seem wrapped in the gentlest shade of blue-black quiet. In a relaxing story like this one, it helps to remember that Planet 9 is thought of not as a fiery place of drama, but as a slow and distant possibility, perhaps a large icy world, perhaps something like a muted cousin to Neptune, perhaps carrying deep cold beneath a high atmosphere, and the uncertainty itself feels velvety tonight, because uncertainty here does not disturb the peace, it deepens it, leaving wide open spaces for the imagination to drift through without urgency. Perhaps there are long layers of cloud there, faint and soft and ancient, moving so slowly that they hardly seem to move at all. And perhaps beneath them lies a hidden interior, storing old heat from the time the solar system was young, a secret warmth tucked far below the frozen outer silence. And there is something comforting in that too, the thought that even in the coldest and most remote places, traces of old beginnings may remain, quiet and faithful like coals beneath ash. As this nighttime story unfolds, you may picture the sun from Planet 9 not as a commanding presence, but as a bright star set in an enormous dark, a tiny hearth at the center of a house, so large that most of its rooms remain unlit and restful. And this changes the feeling of the solar system in a wonderfully sleepy way, because it reminds us that our cosmic home is not crowded or noisy at its edges, but spacious and still, with plenty of room for hidden things, forgotten paths, and gentle mysteries to remain undisturbed for ages. And one of the most serene facts woven into the idea of Planet 9 is that we do not search for it by chasing it through the sky, but by noticing the quiet effects it may leave on other distant objects, like a soft breeze inferred from the turning of leaves. And there is a lesson in that for a gentle bedtime, because not all influence arrives loudly, not all presence must be seen directly, and not all truths announce themselves in bright colors. Some simply shape the world from afar, patiently, tenderly, almost invisibly. So let your breathing become as spacious as this outer darkness now, slow and easy, as though every inhale gathers a little of the cool starlit calm, and every exhale sends your waking thoughts farther away, beyond Uranus, beyond Neptune, beyond the clustered icy bodies that wander the margins, until even your busiest concerns seem as tiny as specks of frost drifting in the Kuiper Belt. And while you rest there, floating in imagination beside this hidden orbital kingdom, consider how soothing it is that a single year on Planet 9, if it exists, would stretch across spans of time so large that human schedules simply dissolve against them. Meetings disappear, clocks lose their sharpness, and the whole busy structure of the day fades into something soft and harmless, because out there, there is only distance, gravity, stillness, and the long, patient arc of a world following its path without complaint. Maybe that is why Planet 9 feels so perfect for a sleep story, because it is less like a destination and more like a lullaby made of astronomy, a faraway possibility that invites the mind to loosen its grip, to stop asking for immediate answers, to accept that some of the loveliest things in science arrive gradually, first as hints, then as patterns, then perhaps one day a sight. And until then, they remain beautifully half hidden, like a lantern glowing through snowfall. And as your body grows heavier and your thoughts grow lighter, you can imagine yourself moving not toward discovery, but toward quiet companionship with this mysterious world, drifting beside its imagined orbit, while the little sun glows at an immense distance behind you, a pearl of light in the endless blue night. And around you, the outer solar system breathes in silence, every icy fragment turning in obedience to gravity's soft music, every remote curve of motion part of a patient design. And somewhere within that design, perhaps, Planet 9 continues onward, calm and unseen, carrying its long winter twilight through the dark, while this gentle bedtime story carries you even farther into rest, into softness, into the kind of deep sleep where vast distances feel warm, hidden planets feel familiar, and the universe itself seems to tuck the edges of night around you with quiet and steady hands. As this sleep story drifts farther into the dim and patient outskirts of the solar system, where light has thinned into a pale memory and silence feels wide enough to rest inside, we begin to notice one of the most calming ideas about Planet 9, which is that even if it remains unseen, it may still be gently shaping the darkness around it, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with gravity, that quiet and faithful force that never needs to announce itself. And in a bedtime story meant to help you fall asleep, there is something deeply reassuring in that, because gravity does not rush, does not panic, does not lose its way, but simply continues, patiently and invisibly, drawing paths through space the way a careful hand might smooth the folds of a blanket in a darkened room. And so tonight, as this relaxing story carries you onward, imagine the outer solar system not as empty, but as delicately arranged, with icy worlds and distant objects tracing long and graceful ellipses through the cold, each one moving in response to forces so subtle they can only be noticed over very long spans of time. And among those subtle motions, astronomers have seen hints, patterns, alignments, quiet irregularities that suggest a large hidden body may be present, perhaps several times more massive than Earth, perhaps moving on a broad and elongated orbit so slow that a single season there would seem to last longer than entire chapters of human history. And if you let your mind settle into that pace, really settle into it, you may feel the day loosening its grip, because Planet 9 belongs to a rhythm far calmer than any schedule, far slower than any hurry. And in this gentle bedtime journey, you do not need to chase it. You only need to float nearby in thought, as though resting in the dark waters of the far solar system, while this calming narration follows the soft pull of its gravity like a thread of silk disappearing into night. Perhaps that is one of the loveliest facts about a world like this, that that it could remain almost completely hidden and still leave behind a signature, a graceful influence on smaller, distant bodies whose paths seem to lean and cluster, as though listening to a quiet conductor no one has yet seen. And when imagined in the softness of a nighttime story, that influence feels less like force and more like kindness, less like command and more like guidance, a reminder that the universe often works through tenderness, through patience, through slow and nearly invisible relationships that only reveal themselves when we become still enough to notice them. And so you may picture those distant icy objects now, scattered beyond Neptune like little lanterns of frost, each one moving through the dark at its own measured pace, while somewhere farther out, an unseen giant turns with solemn calm, shaping the region not by collision or commotion, but by long companionship, by the endless and delicate conversation of gravity. And in that conversation, there is no sharp edge for the mind to catch on, only curves, distances, pauses, and the soft certainty that everything is held in motion by something deeper than urgency. Perhaps Planet 9, if it exists, once formed closer to the sun and was later moved outward during the solar system's younger and more restless days, carried into remoteness by ancient interactions, until at last it found this distant, quiet road where it could continue for ages in deep twilight. And even that possible history feels soothing tonight, because it suggests that wandering is not always loss, that being far away is not always loneliness, and that a long path through darkness can still be a natural and beautiful place to belong. In this sleep story, then, the hidden planet becomes almost like a sleepy guardian of the solar system's farthest edge, not guarding in any vigilant or wakeful sense, but simply by existing there, calmly, steadily, keeping its immense orbit, while the smaller bodies nearby respond in their own slow and graceful ways. And if your thoughts begin to wander, let them wander in that same fashion, gently curved, gently drawn, not needing to arrive anywhere by morning, not needing to solve the heavens before deep sleep comes, only needing to move softly enough that each concern loses its brightness and drifts outward like a distant stone of ice beyond Neptune. And now imagine the darkness around Planet 9 itself, not harsh or frightening, but velvety and blue-black, a darkness with texture, with softness, with room enough for all the tired parts of your mind to stretch out and become quiet, while the sun, so incredibly far away, glows only as a small and concentrated star, a tiny center for a vast and peaceful kingdom of cold. And all around that faint light, the outer solar system turns in such patient harmony that even the idea of time begins to blur, becoming less a ticking line and more a slow, circular breath. And maybe that is the most relaxing story fact of all, that the universe can be guided by what cannot be seen, and that this unseen guidance is not something to fear, but something to trust, because whether or not Planet 9 is one day found directly, the search itself has already shown us a tender truth, that the quietest things can still matter, that hidden things can still shape the world, and that in the deepest dark, there may still be order, elegance, and a gentle path to follow. So as this bedtime story settles around you like cool starlight, Let your own thoughts become lighter and more distant. Let your breathing align with the soft pull of invisible gravity, and let the possibility of a hidden planet gliding patiently through the silent outer dark draw you farther from the busy shore of wakefulness and farther into the long, calm waters of sleep, where every orbit is slow, every mystery is kind, and every drifting moment carries you more gently toward rest. And now, as this sleep story continues its calm and unhurried drift beyond Neptune, you may imagine the solar system not as a crowded machine of hard shining spheres, but as a vast and quiet garden with its brightest flowers blooming close to the sun and its farthest corners fading gently into blue-black stillness. And somewhere near that frosted outer edge, where the light is thin and the silence seems to settle in layers, the idea of Planet 9 remains one of the most soothing mysteries in all of astronomy, because it invites us to picture a world that is not loud, not blazing, not restless, but slow, dim, patient, and almost dreamlike, a hidden companion to the sun, moving through a region so remote that even daylight would arrive like a whisper long after beginning its journey. In this bedtime story, that great distance becomes a comfort, because distance softens everything, and the farther outward we drift, the more the busy details of ordinary life seem to loosen and fall away behind us, until there is only the gentle bedtime rhythm of breath, the quiet turning of thought, and the idea of a planet that may be there, gliding faithfully through darkness that never needs to be disturbed. One of the most relaxing facts about Planet 9 is that scientists think of it not through sudden spectacle, but through delicate hints in the behavior of remote icy objects, the little far-flung wanderers beyond Neptune, whose unusual orbital patterns seem to suggest that some larger body may be guiding them from afar. And that sort of evidence feels especially peaceful tonight, because it means the universe can be read softly, almost like a lullaby, by paying attention to repetition, to subtlety, to the quiet geometry of things that move slowly enough to reward patience. Perhaps Planet 9, if it exists, is several times more massive than Earth, perhaps more like a chilled and distant cousin of Neptune than a rocky world like our own, with a deep interior, a heavy atmosphere, and a long history written in cold rather than warmth. And if so, it may carry old memories from the early solar system, preserving in its silence a story about how planets once shifted and wandered when everything was young, unsettled, and still learning its shape. But tonight, in this relaxing story, even the idea of ancient upheaval becomes soft around the edges, because all that turbulence would be unimaginably far in the past now, and what remains is only the stillness after it, the lasting calm of a world that found its path and kept it, tracing the same distant route around the sun for ages beyond counting. Imagine the sky from such a place, if you like, not bright with morning, not flushed with sunset, but dark almost all the time, with the sun reduced to a very brilliant star, a single needlepoint of light far away at the heart of a huge and silent home. And under that small sun, the whole meaning of a day might change, stretching into something softer and stranger, until the very concept of passing time becomes less like a clock and more like a tide, long and slow and impossible to rush. That is one reason Planet 9 belongs so naturally inside a nighttime story, because it teaches the tired mind that slowness is not emptiness, that remoteness is not absence, and that a thing does not need to be fully seen in order to be real, meaningful, and beautiful. If your thoughts are still gently moving, let them move as the distant objects move, in great ellipses, in soft arcs, in patterns that do not need to be hurried toward any conclusion. Because this is not a story about arriving quickly. It is a sleep story about drifting well, about following calm ideas until they become lighter than words and quieter than memory. And perhaps the loveliest image of all is this, that beyond the known planets, beyond the familiar orbits that schoolchildren memorize and spacecraft carefully cross, there may still be one more great world keeping to itself in the dark, not lost, not lonely, simply far away, wrapped in old cold and old patience, shaping the outer solar system with invisible gravity, while receiving only the faintest touch of sunlight in return. You can picture that gravity now as a gentle influence spreading through the darkness, like ripples through still water, guiding distant bodies over spans so large that no human life could watch the whole motion unfold. And there is peace in that scale, because it frees you from urgency, frees you from the sense that every answer must be immediate, every task completed, every question solved before rest can begin. Here, in this calming narration, the universe itself gives permission to slow down, to remain unfinished, to trust that some of the finest truths reveal themselves only after long waiting. And so, we continue onward together through the frosted edge of the solar garden, where comets sleep in their icy reserves, where dwarf worlds drift like dim pearls in the dark, and where Planet 9, whether someday seen clearly or still hidden for a while longer, remains a tender possibility at the rim of knowledge, a peaceful shape in the mind, a distant lantern almost covered by night. Let that image stay with you now as your breathing grows easier and your body sinks more heavily into rest. Because the farther we travel in imagination, the softer everything becomes, until the outer solar system no longer feels cold at all, only spacious, only still, only calm enough to hold every last waking thought and carry it outward, away from the noise of the day, away from effort, away from the need to keep watch, and into the deep sleep of cosmic quiet, where the hidden planet turns slowly, endlessly, and with such serene patience that your own mind may begin to follow it, round and round, farther and farther into darkness, so gentle it feels almost warm, as this sleep story continues its patient drift through the hushed outskirts of the solar system, where even sunlight seems to move more slowly, and the darkness feels soft instead of empty. You may begin to sense why Planet 9 has become such a soothing companion for a bedtime story, because it is a world imagined at the edge of what we know, not bursting into view, not demanding attention, but resting in the far distance like a dim blue lantern at the boundary of dreams. And in that remoteness, there is a special kind of peace, the kind that tells the mind it does not have to reach, does not have to hurry, does not have to solve anything tonight. Instead, this relaxing story invites you only to float, to breathe, and to let the idea of a hidden planet move gently beside you, farther out than Neptune, beyond the bright familiarity of the known worlds, along a path so broad and slow that each turn around the sun becomes almost like a lullaby made of time itself. And perhaps one of the most calming facts to rest with is that Planet 9 is thought of through quiet effects rather than bright appearances, through the graceful patterns of distant icy bodies whose long orbits seem to hint that something larger may be there, shaping them with a patient gravity that never raises its voice. And if you listen closely in imagination, you can almost feel that gravity not as force, but as tenderness, a silent arrangement in the dark, a cosmic hand guiding frostlit stones through the wide outer garden of the solar system. In this gentle bedtime journey, that hidden influence becomes a comfort, because so much of life asks to be seen immediately and understood all at once. Yet Planet 9 reminds us that some truths remain soft around the edges for a very long time. And still they matter, still they shape the world, still they glow faintly in the mind like embers that do not need to flare in order to give warmth. Imagine now that you are drifting above its suspected realm, not close enough to see a surface, not near enough for detail, but calm enough to sense the scale of it, the stillness of a place where a single season might stretch beyond anything familiar, where the sun is no longer a broad golden presence, but only a concentrated little star far away, and where cold is not sharp or hostile, but deep and sleepy, like layers of blue velvet folded across the sky. Perhaps beneath that distant dimness, there moves a large and quiet planet, several times the mass of Earth in many scientific ideas, perhaps wrapped in gases or ices, perhaps carrying old internal warmth from the youth of the solar system. And there is something beautiful in picturing such a remote world holding onto ancient heat while wandering through ancient cold, as though beginnings never vanish completely, but continue softly inside things long after the brightness of their first moment has faded. That thought fits this nighttime story so well, because sleep itself can feel like that, a retreat inward, a settling below the surface, a keeping of something warm and gentle in the center, while the outer world grows darker and more still. And so as you listen, you may let your own thoughts become more distant and more diffuse, like the tiny frozen bodies beyond Neptune that travel in stretched ellipses through the silent frontier, each one turning slowly under the influence of gravity, each one a small silver note in a larger and quieter song. While Planet 9, whether one day clearly seen or still lingering just beyond direct discovery, remains the low and steady tone beneath them all, the almost hidden harmony that gives shape to the music of the edge. This is what makes it such a lovely subject for calming narration, because it turns astronomy into atmosphere, science into stillness, and distance into a kind of shelter. And the farther outward we imagine ourselves traveling, the more the noisy details of the day fall gently away, as though left behind near the warm inner planets, until nothing remains but dark, breath, time, and the soft possibility of a world moving in faithful silence. Even the uncertainty around Planet 9 becomes restful here, because uncertainty at bedtime can be gentle when it carries wonder instead of worry. And tonight it does exactly that, offering not confusion, but openness, not tension, but room. A reminder that the universe still keeps a few quiet secrets, and that not every unopened door must be pushed upon before morning. Some mysteries are kind enough to sit beside us in the dark without asking anything in return. And Planet 9 feels like one of those mysteries. A patient, unseen neighbor at the edge of the solar system, circling so slowly that human history would seem like a flicker beside it, receiving sunlight so faint that brightness itself would arrive softened and shaping the paths of faraway objects with a grace so subtle that it can only be noticed by those willing to watch the heavens with extraordinary patience. And now, as this sleep story settles more deeply around you, you may imagine the whole outer solar system breathing in long, quiet rhythms, dwarf planets and icy fragments drifting in their cold procession, the little sun shining from an unimaginable distance. And somewhere beyond ordinary, sight the hidden world continuing on its ancient path, calm, untroubled, and nearly dreamlike, while you sink a little deeper into deep sleep, following its slow orbit, not with your eyes, but with your breathing, not with effort, but with surrender, until the very thought of Planet 9 becomes softer than language, softer than memory, softer even than starlight, and all that remains is the feeling of being carried gently through a vast and peaceful dark, where nothing needs to happen quickly again. As this sleep story continues its slow and floating passage through the outermost quiet of the solar system, you may imagine that we have now drifted into a region where even distance feels soft, where the dark no longer seems empty, but layered and restful, and where the thought of Planet 9 glows in the mind like a hidden lantern behind a veil of blue velvet, never fully revealed, and yet never entirely absent. And this is one of the gentlest things about it tonight, that it does not need to appear clearly in order to soothe you, because some of the most peaceful presences are the ones that remain half known, quietly shaping the night from afar while you lie still and let the day dissolve. And so this bedtime story moves onward without hurry, like a small vessel of thought carried on a tide of calm gravity. And somewhere ahead, not close enough to disturb the silence, there remains the imagined path of that distant world, perhaps large and cold and serene, perhaps turning through a darkness so deep that the sun behind it would look less like a sun and more like a tiny star kept safely at the center of an immense black-blue home. And when you picture that little point of light far away, it becomes easier somehow to let your own concerns grow smaller too, to let them shrink until they are no larger than specks of frost drifting across the edge of a dream. One of the most relaxing ideas about Planet 9 is that its story reaches us through patience, because the outer solar system whispers rather than shouts, and the clues that suggest this hidden planet are not flashes or collisions, but arrangements, long leaning orbits, subtle groupings, quiet motions repeated over stretches of time so broad that they feel almost musical. And in this relaxing story, that music is slow and low, and beautifully simple. A kind of cosmic lullaby in which every object beyond Neptune moves with such measured grace that even mathematics begins to feel like a cradle song. Imagine the icy bodies out there now, tiny and pale and ancient, turning through darkness at the edge of sunlight, each one following a long and elegant curve. And imagine how comforting it is that these small wanderers may be gently influenced by something larger, something calm and massive and distant, not forcing them, not frightening them, only accompanying them through gravity's soft conversation. And perhaps that is why this nighttime story grows sleepier as it goes. Because the farther we travel into the suspected realm of Planet 9, the more everything becomes guidance rather than pressure, motion rather than effort, drifting rather than doing. If Planet 9 truly exists, then it may have spent ages beyond counting moving through this quiet territory, keeping to a broad, lonely orbit that is not lonely at all when heard this way, because the dark around it is full of still companionship, full of faint stars and frozen fragments, and the old patient structure of the solar system itself. And there is comfort in that image, the comfort of a place so remote that nothing needs to happen quickly, where seasons would be unimaginably long, where light would arrive softened by distance, and where the silence would be so complete that even thought might begin to float more slowly. As your thoughts are floating now, perhaps this is why a gentle bedtime can borrow so naturally from astronomy, because space at its quietest teaches the body to rest, and Planet 9, hidden in the far reaches beyond familiar worlds, becomes a kind of teacher of slowness, reminding you that not every journey must be visible, not every influence must be loud, and not every truth must come all at once before it can begin to comfort. And as this calming narration carries you farther, you may picture the hidden world not as a sharp object with defined edges, but as a presence wrapped in distance, a place where dim light brushes over high cold layers, where old heat may still sleep deep inside beneath the frozen calm, and where time itself seems to collect like snow, softly, quietly, almost soundlessly, settling over ages and ages, until the whole planet feels less like a destination and more like a memory. The solar system has nearly forgotten, but not entirely, and there is something especially peaceful in the possibility that a world can remain out there unseen for so long, because it means the universe still has room for gentleness, still has corners it has not hurried to explain, still keeps a few serene secrets folded in its farthest blankets of dark. And tonight those secrets are not troubling, they are tender, giving your mind permission to rest without resolving everything, to drift without deciding, to listen without holding on. So let the words of this sleep story become softer now, softer than the bright thoughts of the day, softer than names and numbers and schedules, and let Planet 9 become simply a faraway companion in the darkness, a hidden traveler moving with perfect patience around a tiny distant sun, while all around it the outer solar system remains vast and still, like a silver hush spread over a sleeping garden. And if you feel yourself sinking lower into the bed, lower into quiet, lower into that lovely space just before deep sleep, then follow that feeling as you would follow a slow orbit, gently, without effort, because nothing is required of you here except to keep floating beside this unseen horizon, where gravity is kind, mystery is warm, and the immense dark beyond Neptune seems to fold around you at last, like the softest possible night. By now, as this sleep story glides more deeply into the quiet borderlands beyond Neptune, you may feel the whole solar system becoming softer around the edges, as though the bright, busy rooms near the sun have been left far behind, and all that remains is the enormous, silver-blue hush of distance. And within that hush, the idea of Planet 9 continues to drift beside us like a patient companion, never hurrying, never demanding to be fully seen, only inviting us to rest in the calm possibility of its presence. And tonight, one of the most relaxing thoughts about this hidden world is that it may be traveling along a path so vast and stretched that even the word orbit seems too brisk for it, because what Planet 9 may really be doing, in the deepest sense, is lingering, circling in a motion so slow and graceful that time itself appears to lie down beside it. And that is a lovely thing for a bedtime story, because when the mind hears of a world that takes perhaps thousands of years to complete its journey, it begins to remember that not everything in existence is meant to happen quickly. Not every answer is meant to arrive tonight, and not every mystery loses its beauty by remaining partly veiled in darkness. So picture this distant realm now as a cold and peaceful province of the solar system, where faint sunlight arrives only after traveling an immense and patient road, where icy bodies trace long loops through the dark, like sleepy thoughts circling the edge of awareness, and where Planet 9, if it is truly there, moves with such steady calm that the smaller objects around it may slowly respond, leaning and gathering in patterns that suggest a hidden influence too gentle to be called anything but graceful. In this relaxing story, gravity itself becomes a kind of lullaby, not a force to fear, not a push or a pull to resist, but a soft, organizing presence that keeps everything from drifting entirely apart. And perhaps that is why the outer solar system feels so soothing tonight, because even in its emptiest looking reaches, there is still relationship, still quiet order, still a kind of music made from distance and patience, and the curve of unseen hands. If you imagine Planet 9 as a great ice giant wrapped in deep twilight, perhaps with old warmth sleeping far beneath a cold exterior, then it becomes easier to sense how ancient this story really is, because such a world would not belong only to the present moment, but to the earliest chapters of the solar system, to an age when planets shifted their places and found their long-term paths, when the architecture of our cosmic home was still being gently arranged. And now, after all that time, this possible hidden planet may still be carrying the memory of that beginning through the dark. There is comfort in that thought, in the idea that a world can wander far and still belong, can become remote and still remain part of the same greater family. And maybe the heart understands that more easily at night, when everything seems farther away, and yet somehow more intimate, when the ceiling above you can feel like a private sky, and the silence in the room can begin to resemble the silence between the stars. And so this nighttime story asks nothing difficult of you now, only that you continue to float here in imagination, far beyond the blue path of Neptune, where the sun has dwindled to a brilliant dot, and the darkness has become tender rather than empty. And as you float, notice how naturally your breathing can join the rhythm of this faraway world. Slow on the inhale, slower on the exhale, as if each breath were following one small portion of Planet Nine's vast and sleepy curve around the distant light. Perhaps somewhere along that long path, there are intervals of even deeper dimness, stretches where the hidden planet moves through such cold, serene remoteness that the stars themselves seem to keep it company in stillness. And if so, that companionship is gentle enough to borrow for yourself now, because sleep too is a kind of quiet companionship with darkness, not a loss, not an absence, but a soft surrender into a larger calm. And what makes Planet Nine especially beautiful in a calming narration is that it remains balanced between evidence and dream, between mathematics and imagination, between what the universe has hinted and what it has not yet fully shown. So it becomes a perfect place for the tired mind to rest, neither fixed too sharply nor lost completely, but glowing at the threshold of understanding like a lantern, partly covered by winter mist. Imagine the distant objects of the outer solar system continuing their slow procession, each one pale and silent, each one touched by cold and time. And somewhere among their broad, invisible harmonies, the suspected planet goes on, undisturbed by clocks, untouched by hurry, carrying its deep, long seasons through the outer dark, while the little sun remains far behind, like a pin of gold sewn into velvet. And the more clearly you picture that scene, the less reason there is to hold onto the day. Because here in this gentle bedtime, there are no deadlines, no sharp corners, no bright alarms, only orbits, stillness, and the profound reassurance that the universe contains places where motion is almost indistinguishable from rest. So let your thoughts grow as faint and spacious as the light in Planet Nine's sky. Let them stretch into long, quiet ellipses and pass without effort. And let this hidden world, with its patient gravity and remote twilight and ancient unspoken story, lead you farther out beyond wakefulness, farther from noise, farther into the velvety outskirts of deep sleep, where every mystery is softened, every distance is peaceful, and every slow cosmic arc becomes a cradle rocking, almost too gently to feel, as this sleep story carries you farther into the soft and secret outskirts of the solar system, beyond the bright certainty of the known planets, and into a darkness that feels almost tender. You may begin to notice that the idea of Planet Nine has changed its shape within your mind, no longer seeming like a puzzle that asks to be solved, but more like a presence that asks only to be felt, a distant and quiet companion gliding beyond Neptune, where the sunlight is faint. The stars appear steady and numerous, and time itself seems to move so slowly that it forgets how to hurry. And in a bedtime story meant to help you fall asleep, that is one of the loveliest facts of all, that somewhere out there may be a world so remote that even a single year could stretch across thousands of Earth years, turning the whole concept of waiting into something peaceful, spacious, and beautifully untroubled. And so tonight, in this relaxing story, you do not need to picture Planet 9 in sharp detail, because distance has already softened it into something gentler. Perhaps a cold and massive world, perhaps a great blue-gray wanderer wrapped in dim atmosphere and old stillness. Perhaps a hidden planet carrying the memory of the early solar system through regions where the sun looks less like a sun and more like a bright and patient star. And as you imagine that little light so very far away, you may feel your own thoughts beginning to loosen and drift, as though the mind itself were entering a larger orbit, one where nothing needs to be resolved before rest is allowed. Perhaps that is why this nighttime story grows calmer with each passing chapter, because Planet 9 belongs to a part of the universe where everything is measured in long curves and silent companionship, where dwarf planets and icy bodies move like pale thoughts through the Kuiper Belt and beyond, and where gravity speaks in whispers rather than commands, arranging the edges of the solar system with such subtle patience that astronomers must study the smallest repeated patterns to sense its presence. And there is profound comfort in that, in knowing that some of the greatest things in existence announce themselves softly, not through brightness or speed, but through the gentle way they shape what lies around them. Imagine for a moment the sky from somewhere in that hidden realm, a sky where darkness is not empty, but velvety, rich, and full of stillness, where sunlight arrives tired and silvered after an impossibly long journey, where every glimmer seems to hover rather than flash, and where the unseen path of Planet 9 curves onward through the cold like a ribbon laid carefully across the floor of the night. And if that image begins to blur at the edges, let it blur, because this gentle bedtime is not asking you to hold onto every word, only to rest inside the feeling of it, the great softness of cosmic distance, the hush of faraway motion, the calm suggestion that somewhere beyond ordinary sight a world may be circling with serene and ancient loyalty. And another soothing truth about Planet 9, even in its uncertainty, is that it reminds us how unfinished and alive science truly is, how the solar system is not a closed book, but a quiet library with one or two dark shelves still waiting to be explored. And that unfinished quality does not need to wake the mind. It can lull it instead, because an unfinished story can be a place of rest when it is held gently, when it asks nothing urgent, when it allows mystery to remain kind. So as this calming narration continues, let yourself imagine that this distant planet, if it is there, has traveled its path for ages without complaint, through long winters of starlight, through faint glows and deep shadows, through epochs so broad that mountains on earth could rise and wear away, while it barely rounds one portion of its immense orbit. And in that scale, there is a tenderness that can quiet even the busiest thoughts, because compared with such patient movement, your own concerns are free to become small, free to become light, free to drift outward and settle among the frosted stones beyond Neptune. And perhaps Planet 9, whether once formed closer to the sun or cast into its distant path long ago, now belongs so completely to this remote silence that it seems almost woven from it, a planet made not only of matter and gravity, but of stillness itself, a world whose presence can be sensed in the graceful leaning of other orbits, in the careful mathematics of astronomers, and in the quiet wonder that lingers whenever human beings look toward the edge of the known and realize there may yet be one more companion waiting in the dark. That thought is gentle enough to carry with you now as your breathing becomes slower and rounder, as the bed beneath you feels warmer and heavier, and as this sleep story turns from language into atmosphere, from sentences into a kind of soft cosmic weather, a slow drift through deep sleep where every fact arrives cushioned by darkness and every image dissolves into peace. And so we remain here a little longer in the velvet distance where time grows quiet, beside the imagined orbit of a hidden world, with the little sun shining far away like a pearl of gold, and the outer solar system resting in wide blue-black calm. And if your thoughts wander now, let them wander as Planet 9 itself might wander, steadily, quietly, without effort, tracing a great invisible arc through the night, until wakefulness fades behind you completely, until the stars grow softer than memory, until gravity itself seems to tuck the edges of the dark around you, and until this bedtime story becomes not something you are listening to, but something you are floating inside, carried onward by mystery, by silence, and by the slow and peaceful promise of sleep. In this sleep story, as we continue to drift through the velvet outskirts beyond Neptune, where the solar system grows quiet enough to seem almost asleep itself, you may notice how naturally the idea of Planet 9 settles into the mind, not as something sharp or demanding, but as something soft and spacious, like a thought wrapped in midnight blue. And tonight, one of the most relaxing ways to imagine this hidden world is as a faraway companion whose presence is felt through pattern, through patience, through the calm and nearly musical arrangement of distant objects that move as though listening to a silent rhythm only gravity can hear. And that is such a peaceful thing to bring into a bedtime story, because it means this possible planet does not need to burst into view in order to matter, does not need to shine brightly in order to belong, but may simply continue its long and patient wandering in the outer dark, guiding the smallest icy travelers with a softness so subtle that only careful watching reveals it. And as you hear that, your own breathing may begin to follow the same slow principle, not forced, not measured too tightly, just gently settling into a rhythm that asks less and less of you with every passing moment. Perhaps this is why Planet 9 feels so suited to a nighttime story, because it belongs to a region where time has grown broad and quiet, where an orbit may stretch over thousands of Earth years, where the sun has softened into a little bright star far away, and where the ordinary urgency of life cannot quite survive the distance, so that every schedule, every unfinished thought, every small concern becomes lighter and dimmer as we move farther into this dark and peaceful province of the sky. Imagine the hidden world there now, not clearly seen, not outlined in any hard way, but sensed as a large and quiet body moving in deep twilight. Perhaps through fields of faint starlight and old cold, perhaps carrying a heavy calm within it, perhaps turning so slowly through space that it feels less like motion and more like rest. And let that idea comfort you, because there is something deeply soothing about a place where movement can become almost indistinguishable from stillness. All around this suspected realm, distant icy objects continue their long elliptical paths, and in this relaxing story, they seem less like rocks and more like sleepy lanterns of frost, each following a graceful curve, each gliding through the hush at the edge of sunlight. And somewhere among their patterns, the possibility of Planet 9 remains, not loud, not dramatic, only steady, as though the universe had placed one final quiet note at the far end of the solar system and allowed it to ring very softly for ages. This calming narration does not ask you to solve the mystery of that note tonight, only to rest beside it, because wonder itself can be restful when it arrives without pressure, when it offers space instead of demand, when it lets the mind drift rather than chase. And perhaps that is one of the kindest facts hidden inside the Planet 9 story, that science can sometimes feel like listening in the dark, not for answers that rush forward, but for patterns that slowly, gently become clear. And so you may picture the great outer dark now as a wide sleeping sea, with Neptune far behind us, the inner planets impossibly distant, and the sun itself reduced to a tiny warm pearl, shining at the heart of a home so vast that silence has room to stretch out in every direction. And somewhere in that enormous calm, the hidden planet keeps its old and faithful path, perhaps ancient beyond imagination, perhaps still carrying the memory of the early solar system in its long, cold journey, perhaps shaped by events long ago that have now faded into quiet, leaving only the serene continuation of orbit after orbit after orbit. There is comfort in that continuation, in the thought that some things endure not by resisting time, but by flowing with it, slowly and without strain. And as this gentle bedtime deepens, you may let your own thoughts do the same, drifting outward like pale fragments beyond Neptune, no longer trying to hold their shape too tightly, no longer asking to be finished before sleep arrives, but simply moving in easy arcs through a softer and softer darkness. Maybe that is the secret gift of a sleep story like this one, that a distant world can teach the body how to rest by example, showing you that even great things move gently in the deepest parts of the universe, that even uncertainty can be warm when wrapped in patience, and that even hidden things can offer companionship in the night. So if your mind begins to blur around the edges now, let it blur. And if the images begin to fade into feeling, let them fade, because the faraway companion we call Planet 9 does not need perfect focus in order to guide this bedtime story forward. Only the quiet suggestion of distance, the soft geometry of unseen gravity, the pale hush of remote starlight, and the steady reassurance that somewhere beyond the last familiar planet, there may still be one more calm traveler circling in silence. And as you float beside that possibility, carried by this relaxing story toward deep sleep, you can let the day fall away completely. Let the stars dim into softness. Let the outer solar system become one endless dark cradle and let the hidden arc of Planet 9 rock you slowly, gently, and almost imperceptibly into rest as this sleep story continues its slow and gentle passage through the farthest hush beyond Neptune, where the dark has become soft as velvet and the stars seem to breathe in patient silence. You may imagine that we are now drifting beside one of the most soothing ideas about Planet 9, which is that if this hidden world is truly there, then it must know seasons unlike anything on Earth, not quick changes of wind and leaf and light, but seasons stretched across immense reaches of time, seasons so long and calm that they would feel less like events and more like moods of the universe itself, and in a bedtime story that can be wonderfully comforting because it reminds you that not every change needs to happen suddenly. Not every transition needs to be noticed all at once, and not every journey has to be measured in hours or days in order to be meaningful. Instead, Planet 9 invites the mind into a slower rhythm, a rhythm where the hidden planet may take thousands of Earth years to complete its path around the sun, wandering along a broad and quiet ellipse through deep cold and faint light, while the little sun far away glimmers more like a bright star than a warm and familiar fire. And as you picture that distance now, you may feel your own thoughts becoming more spacious, less urgent, more willing to drift without needing to arrive anywhere before sleep. Perhaps that is the special gentleness of this relaxing story, that the farther outward we travel, the more time itself seems to soften, until the day behind you no longer feels sharp or crowded, but distant and already fading, like a shoreline receding behind a boat that moves without wake across an endless midnight sea. And somewhere in that sea of stillness, Planet 9 may continue its hidden orbit with profound patience, perhaps leaning through a tilted path, perhaps carrying its cold and quiet atmosphere through regions where sunlight barely touches it, perhaps turning with such unhurried grace that its very motion becomes a kind of stillness. And there is such peace in imagining a world like that, a world not racing toward dawn or away from night, but simply keeping to its long celestial road with perfect calm. In this gentle bedtime, you do not need to think of seasons there as harsh or lonely, only deep and serene, like vast blue winters unfolding so gradually that they become indistinguishable from rest, as though the planet were wrapped not in weather, but in a soft and ancient hush. And if your own mind still holds a little brightness from the waking day, a few active thoughts moving like small comets through the dark, let them slow now. Let them widen into longer orbits, because Planet 9 teaches such a tender lesson in slowness, showing that even a hidden world can have a faithful path. Even a distant object can belong to the same solar family, and even the darkest frontier can be full of order, quiet companionship, and gentle design. Imagine the far outer solar system around it, the scattered icy bodies drifting in silence, each one pale and ancient, each one moving in broad and elegant loops beneath the farthest stars, while the suspected planet, unseen yet deeply felt, offers the faintest organizing presence, not commanding, not interrupting, only guiding through gravity's soft persistence. And perhaps That is why this nighttime story becomes more restful with every chapter, because the universe here is not loud enough to disturb you, only calm enough to hold you. And as we drift beside this hidden orbit, you may picture time gathering there like layers of frost, one age settling upon another without sound, without hurry, without resistance, until the whole region feels timeless, almost sheltered from the rush of ordinary life. And in that shelter, your breathing can become slower too, your body heavier, your thoughts lighter, as though the same distant patience that carries Planet 9 around the sun were now carrying you away from wakefulness and into deep sleep. Perhaps this unseen world once traveled through a different chapter of the solar system long ago. Perhaps it moved closer to the sun in ancient times before finding its present remoteness. And if so, there is something soothing in that possibility as well, because it suggests that even long wandering can lead to a place of quiet belonging. That distance can become home, and that a path through darkness may still be gentle when it is held by gravity and time. Tonight, in this calming narration, those possibilities need not be solved. They only need to be felt as soft truths around the edges of imagination, like starlight through a curtain, and you can let them pass slowly through the mind without trying to keep each one. Because this is a sleep story, not a lecture. A bedtime story meant to rock the thoughts rather than sharpen them, meant to help you fall asleep by reminding you that the cosmos contains places so peaceful and so patient that even mystery itself becomes a lullaby. And now, the hidden orbit of Planet 9 seems almost like a cradle drawn in the dark. A great elliptical curve rocking silently around a tiny distant sun, while all around it, the outer solar system rests in blue-black stillness. And if you listen closely, you may feel that stillness spreading inward from the imagined heavens to the quiet room around you, from the cold outer dark to the warm softness beneath you, until the whole universe appears to be breathing more slowly, more gently, more deeply. And with every breath, you drift a little farther into rest, following the quiet seasons of that unseen world, farther beyond thought, farther beyond effort, farther into the serene and endless calm where sleep arrives as softly as starlight on the edge of a dream. As this sleep story drifts onward through the quiet and spacious reaches beyond Neptune, where every trace of brightness has softened into silver and blue, and the stars seem to glow without urgency, you may begin to notice how peaceful it feels to imagine the sun from the realm of Planet 9, not as the grand blazing center we know from Earth, but as a pale and faraway hearth, a tiny point of faithful light kept at the center of an immense and sleeping home. And in this bedtime story, that image is especially soothing because it turns even the greatest source of light in our solar system into something gentle enough to rest beside, something distant enough to calm the mind, something small enough to remind you that the farther out we travel, the softer everything becomes, and somewhere in that softened distance, perhaps far beyond the frozen pathways of the known planets, the hidden world of Planet 9 may be continuing its long and unhurried orbit, carrying its old silence and its deep cold through regions where sunlight arrives only after a journey so long that it seems almost dreamlike. And And when you imagine that faint light touching the unseen planet, you do not need to picture anything harsh or empty, only a dim and patient glow, a quiet wash of far-off brightness over a world that may spend ages moving through twilight. Perhaps that is one of the loveliest relaxing facts about Planet 9, that its remoteness transforms the whole idea of day into something calmer, something gentler, something more like an endless dusk than a morning. And in that endless dusk, there's no need to hurry, no need to solve, no need even to hold tightly to every thought, because this nighttime story is here to help you fall asleep, not by pulling you forward, but by letting you float farther and farther into a place where time loosens its grip. Imagine, if you like, that the outer solar system has become a great quiet room, with the little sun glowing like a candle at the far end, while around you drift the ancient icy bodies of the frontier, each one tracing its own graceful curve in the dark, each one moving so slowly that its motion feels almost like breathing. And among them, perhaps shaping their patterns from afar, perhaps guiding their long ellipses with unseen kindness, the hidden influence of Planet 9 remains steady and serene. In this gentle bedtime journey, gravity itself becomes comforting, because out here it does not feel like a force of strain, but like a soft arrangement, a patient holding together of distant things. And that can be a restful thought to carry now, that even at the very edge of the solar system, there is still structure, still relationship, still a kind of quiet companionship between bodies separated by vast and silent space. Maybe that is why this relaxing story grows more peaceful the farther it goes, because Planet 9 belongs to a realm where nothing happens quickly, where a single orbit may stretch across spans so vast that whole chapters of human history would pass like a brief shimmer. And in the presence of such slowness, the mind is allowed to become slower too, allowed to stop measuring, stop counting, stop preparing for the next thing. Perhaps the hidden planet itself, if it exists, carries deep within it the memory of the early solar system, a memory preserved in cold, in distance, in the long, unbroken patience of its path. And there is something deeply tender in the idea that a world can wander so far and still remain part of the same celestial family, still circling the same distant sun, still belonging even from the edge. And if any thought from the day is still moving inside you, let it move the way Planet 9 might move, slowly, quietly, in a wide, gentle arc that asks for no resistance. Because this calming narration is not trying to sharpen the mind, but to smooth it, not trying to brighten wakefulness, but to dim it into softness, so that every idea becomes rounder and every feeling lighter. Now picture the little sun again in the sky of that faraway realm, not large enough to dominate, only bright enough to remind the darkness where home is. A pale hearth glowing at an impossible distance, while all around it, the solar system opens outward like a vast sleeping garden of frost and silence. And somewhere in its outermost paths, Planet 9 may continue its hidden turning, receiving that faint light without complaint, reflecting it perhaps only weakly, and yet holding within its unseen journey a calm so deep that even imagination begins to quiet in response. This is what makes Planet 9 so perfect for a sleep story, because it is not merely a planet to think about, but a rhythm to rest inside, a mystery that does not disturb, a bedtime story fact that does not ask to be completed before deep sleep begins. And so, as we drift here together beside the pale hearth of the distant sun, let the words become softer than meaning, softer than memory, softer than effort itself, until the hidden planet is no longer something you are trying to picture clearly, but simply a peaceful presence in the dark, a faraway companion gliding through velvet distance. While your breathing slows to meet it, your body grows heavy and warm, and the whole outer solar system seems to rock you gently, quietly, and almost invisibly toward rest. And now, as this sleep story continues its gentle drift through the cold and velvety reaches beyond Neptune, where every brightness has softened and every motion has become slow enough to feel almost like stillness, you may imagine yourself moving through a silence so wide and calm that it no longer seems empty at all, but full of tender space, full of quiet distance, full of the kind of peace that only the far edge of the solar system can offer. And somewhere within that immense and patient hush, the idea of Planet 9 remains beside us, not as a sharp image, not as a question that needs to be answered before morning, but as a hidden and soothing presence, a faraway world that may be circling the sun with such extraordinary patience that whole ages of human life would pass like a single sigh before it completed even a small part of its path. And in this bedtime story, that slowness is a gift, because it invites the mind to release its usual pace, to stop reaching ahead, to stop holding tightly to the day, and instead to drift into a rhythm so broad and peaceful that even thought itself begins to stretch out and grow quiet. Just as the outer solar system stretches outward into the dark, where icy bodies turn through long ellipses, and the sunlight, traveling so very far, arrives softened into something more like memory than illumination. Perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about Planet 9, that if it exists, it belongs not to the bright urgency of the inner worlds, but to a kingdom of distant twilight, where the sun is no longer a blazing ruler overhead, but only a small bright star, a pale and faithful point of light suspended at the center of a great and sleeping house. And from so far away, even that star would seem softened by the journey, which makes it easy tonight to imagine a sky where all brightness is gentle, all contrast is eased, and all sharpness has been wrapped in blue-black stillness. And as you listen, let your breathing settle into that same softness, slow and untroubled, like a hidden planet taking its time. Because there is no need to hurry here, no need to remember each fact or follow each image with effort, only the calm invitation to float through this relaxing story, as though it were a current carrying you farther out, farther from the noise of the day, farther into the quiet where Planet 9 may be moving unseen. Perhaps it is large and cold, perhaps a distant ice giant, perhaps a world with old warmth sleeping deep inside beneath layers of frozen calm, perhaps holding within its hidden body the memory of the early solar system. And there is something especially soothing in imagining that secret warmth tucked far below the long outer winter, because it reminds us that even the coldest and most remote places may still cradle traces of their beginnings, soft embers preserved in silence. In this gentle bedtime, that hidden interior becomes almost like the last warm thought before sleep, faint but steady, sheltered by darkness, needing no attention at all. Around it, in imagination, the outer solar system remains beautifully spacious, scattered with pale little wanderers of ice and stone, whose orbits seem subtly arranged, as though a quiet influence were passing through them all. And this is another of Planet Nine's restful wonders, that its presence may be known not by spectacle, but by pattern, not by brightness, but by grace, through the delicate leaning of distant paths and the patient mathematics of celestial motion. And when you hear that, you do not need to picture equations or telescopes, only the soothing idea that even in the farthest dark, there can still be order, still be gentleness, still be a kind of invisible companionship, holding things in relation to one another. Maybe that is why this nighttime story becomes softer with every chapter, because the farther outward we travel, the less the universe feels like a place of urgency, and the more it feels like a place of trust, where worlds can move unseen for ages and still belong, where silence is not absence but shelter, and where mystery does not disturb the night but deepens it, making room for the mind to rest without needing to finish every thought it began before bed. And so you may picture the hidden orbit of Planet 9 now as a long and graceful curve drawn through the darkness beneath the farthest stars, a curve so broad that it seems less like a line and more like a cradle slowly rocking through deep time, while the small sun remains far behind like a distant lantern. And all around it, the cold frontier breathes in slow and endless quiet. If your thoughts drift now, let them drift the way those icy outer bodies drift, in easy arcs, in wide circles, in slow returning paths that never collide with urgency. Because this calming narration is meant to be like that too, a gentle bedtime current, not leading you toward awakening, but carrying you gently away from it, until language loosens into atmosphere and atmosphere loosens into sleep. And in that sleepward atmosphere, Planet 9 becomes less a planet and more a feeling, a faraway calm, a hidden steadiness at the edge of knowledge, where gravity is soft, distance is kind, and time itself seems to have laid down among the stars to rest. So remain here a little longer in the floating silence between the smallest lights, where the known planets are far behind, where the dark is deep but never harsh, where the unseen world continues its patient journey through the outer solar system, and where your own mind can follow it not by thinking harder, but by surrendering more gently, breath by breath, farther into stillness, farther into comfort, farther into that vast and peaceful deep sleep where all mysteries are softened, all distances are warm, and the night holds you as calmly as space holds its most distant worlds. As this sleep story drifts farther into the deep and tender outskirts of the solar system, where Neptune has long since faded behind us, and the sun shines only as a small, patient lantern in the unimaginable distance, you may begin to feel that the darkness here is not empty at all, but full of soft arrangement, full of hidden music, full of the slow and graceful order that comes when distant worlds keep their paths for ages without hurry. And tonight, that is one of the most relaxing ways to imagine Planet 9, not as a sharp discovery waiting to startle the sky, but as a calm and secret member of a quiet choir, a world whose presence may be sensed in the way other far-off objects lean into their long orbits, as though listening to a melody too low and too gentle for waking ears. And in this bedtime story, that melody becomes a comfort because it asks nothing from you except stillness, except breath, except the willingness to let your thoughts float a little farther out into the blue-black hush, where everything large moves slowly and everything distant becomes kind. Perhaps that is why a relaxing story about Planet 9 feels so natural at night, because this hidden world belongs to a region where time has stretched itself thin and peaceful, where an orbit may take not days or years in any familiar sense, but vast spans that make human schedules dissolve into harmless mist. And when you picture that immense patience now, you may feel your own mind beginning to soften around the edges, loosening from the small, bright hooks of the day, letting each unfinished thought drift outward like a pale grain of frost beyond the orbit of Neptune, and somewhere beyond those familiar planetary paths. Astronomers have imagined a large, cold companion moving through the dim frontier, perhaps guiding the graceful clustering of remote icy bodies, perhaps carrying old memories from the early solar system in its hidden and unhurried motion. And though this nighttime story does not need to press upon every detail, it can rest beautifully in the feeling of that possibility, that there may still be one more great traveler circling the sun in silence, receiving only a faint touch of light after a journey so long that sunlight itself seems to arrive drowsy and subdued. Imagine that faint light now, silvered by distance, touching a faraway atmosphere, or perhaps brushing the upper cold of an unseen world. And notice how gentle even brightness becomes out here, how the sun itself is softened into a star-like glow, how every edge is dimmed into velvet, how every motion becomes slow enough to resemble rest. In this gentle bedtime, Planet 9 becomes almost like a lesson in surrender, because it does not shine to prove itself, does not rush to be noticed, does not ask the universe for attention, but simply continues, steady and faithful, along its long dark arc. And there is something deeply peaceful in that kind of existence, something the body understands when it begins to sink more heavily into bed, when the breathing grows slower, when the need to explain everything starts to fall away. All around this hidden realm, the outer solar system may be filled with small wandering bodies of ice and stone, each moving through immense ellipses beneath the farthest stars. And if Planet 9 is there among them, then its gravity may be less like a command and more like a lullaby, a soft, organizing presence that keeps the choir in harmony without ever raising its voice. And that image, a choir of distant orbits singing silently in the dark, can be a lovely one to follow toward deep sleep, because it turns astronomy into something almost cradle-like, a pattern of return, a rhythm of patience, a music so slow that it folds naturally into the calm beat of your own breathing. Perhaps this is the true gift of a sleep story like this, that science and serenity can rest together, that a world still partly hidden can feel more soothing than certain, and that mystery itself can become gentle when wrapped in enough distance, enough darkness, enough time. Maybe Planet 9 once wandered outward during the early shaping of the solar system and found, at last, this far and quiet province where it could remain for ages, not lost, not lonely, only remote. And that thought, too, can be comforting tonight, because it suggests that distance is not the same as absence, and wandering is not the same as being without a home. Even at the edge of the known, there may still be belonging, still be pattern, still be a slow and faithful relationship with the little sun glowing far away at the center of it all. So let this calming narration become lighter now, as though each sentence were only a small flake of starlight settling over you. And let the hidden planet remain where it is, just beyond sight, just within wonder, moving through its great invisible curve, while the surrounding icy bodies continue their sleepy procession, like silver notes crossing a dark page of music. You do not need to follow every note, only the feeling of the whole arrangement, the vastness of it, the softness of it, the way the outer solar system seems to breathe in long, quiet intervals, and the way Planet 9, whether one day seen clearly or still waiting in the hush beyond Neptune, can already serve as a peaceful companion in this bedtime story, guiding you not toward answers, but toward rest, not toward brightness, but toward softness, not toward effort, but toward the slow and gentle surrender of sleep, where all the distant orbits keep singing without sound, and all the stars grow dim enough for dreaming in this sleep story, as we drift even farther beyond the last familiar map of the solar system, into that wide and whispering province where Neptune is only a memory behind us, and the sun has become a tiny, patient bead of light in the dark. You may begin to feel that Planet 9 is no longer simply a distant idea, but a soft horizon for the mind itself, a place where everything you carried through the day can gradually lose its weight and float free. And tonight, that is one of the gentlest gifts of this bedtime story, that it leads you toward a world that may exist in deep blue twilight, moving through such immense quiet that even time seems to lower its voice before passing by. Perhaps Planet 9, if it is truly there, glides through a region where sunlight arrives thin and silver after an unimaginably long journey, and perhaps that faint light rests on an unseen atmosphere or a hidden icy calm with such tenderness that nothing sharp remains, nothing hurried survives, only a vast cool softness stretching outward in all directions. And in this relaxing story, you do not need to picture every detail clearly, only the feeling of that remoteness, the way distance can smooth every bright edge, soften every urgent thought, and make even the grand architecture of the heavens feel like a cradle. The farther we travel in this nighttime story, the more the outer solar system resembles a sleeping garden of frost and shadow, with long elliptical paths curving through silence like ribbons laid across velvet. And somewhere among those ancient, patient lines, Planet 9 continues its hidden turning, steady and untroubled. A companion not to noise or spectacle, but to stillness, to mystery, to the slow and beautiful art of remaining unseen without ever being absent. And perhaps that is why this calming narration grows more peaceful with each chapter, because the world we are following does not ask to be solved before you rest, does not require effort, does not demand attention, but simply offers a place for the mind to settle, as though somewhere beyond the known planets there is one more quiet room in the house of the sun, dimly lit, rarely entered, yet perfectly prepared to receive a tired traveler and wrap them in silence. Imagine that room now as a great open sky of blue-black calm, where the smallest stars seem steady and kind, where icy bodies drift like pale seeds on a winter current, and where the hidden influence of Planet 9 passes among them like a soft, organizing breath, so subtle that it is felt more as harmony than as force, more as a lullaby than a command. And if you let your own breathing match that hush, slow and easy and unforced, you may notice how naturally the body begins to follow, how easily the shoulders sink, how gently the jaw loosens, how willingly the mind starts to release the bright little burdens it was still holding. This is the quiet wisdom of a gentle bedtime, that you do not fall asleep by striving harder, but by moving more like the farthest worlds move, in long, calm arcs, without resistance, without haste, trusting that the path will carry you. Perhaps Planet 9 has spent ages doing exactly that, crossing its lonely-looking, but not lonely orbit, receiving only the faintest wash of distant sunlight, keeping old secrets from the early solar system tucked inside its slow and hidden journey, and all the while never asking to be hurried into revelation, never rushing forward from the dark, only remaining what it is, a possible world of patience, a restful mystery turning beyond ordinary sight. In a sleep story like this, that patience becomes a kind of shelter, because it reminds you that unfinished things can be gentle, unanswered questions can be safe, and the unknown can sometimes be the most comforting space of all when it is held in enough quiet. So if any thought still flickers within you, let it become smaller now. Let it drift outward beyond Uranus and Neptune, and into the colder and softer reaches where Planet 9 may wander, until that thought is no more troubling than a distant speck of ice passing beneath a faint star. And if another thought comes after it, let that one drift too, because this bedtime story has no need to collect them, no need to hold them close, only to set them afloat in a place so vast and serene that each one naturally grows dimmer. And now the whole outer solar system seems to breathe in slower rhythms, its distant bodies gliding in patient geometry, its darkness full not of emptiness, but of room, room for old worlds, room for long orbits, room for the mind to rest without explanation. And somewhere ahead, or perhaps simply all around us in feeling, the blue twilight of Planet 9 lingers like a calm presence at the edge of dream, a hidden lantern beneath layers of night. Stay with that image for a little while longer, the little sun far away behind you, the unseen planet somewhere before you, the cold made gentle by distance, the silence made warm by repetition, the whole relaxing story becoming softer and slower, until words themselves begin to thin like starlight across immense space. And as they thin, let yourself drift with them, farther from the day, farther from effort, farther from the need to remain awake, until this sleep story is no longer something you are listening to at all, but something carrying you, like a quiet current through the blue twilight, beyond the last familiar map, toward deep sleep, toward stillness, toward that peaceful place where hidden planets keep their ancient paths. And every distant orbit rocks the night a little more gently as this sleep story continues to drift through the great and silent outer sea beyond Neptune, where the stars seem steadier, the darkness softer, and the little sun far away, more like a memory than a flame. You may feel that the journey itself has become slower than thought, calmer than the day you left behind. And that is a lovely place from which to imagine Planet 9 once more, not as a sudden discovery waiting to leap from the shadows, but as a patient and hidden world moving through the farthest quiet with such gentle persistence that even time seems to soften around it. And tonight, one of the most relaxing facts to carry with you is that if Planet 9 exists, it may be following an orbit so immense and so unhurried that an entire human lifetime would pass like a brief flicker beside only a small portion of its path, which means that out there, in that deep and blue-black stillness, nothing needs to be rushed. Nothing needs to be completed before rest can begin. And nothing asks more of you now than to breathe slowly and let the mind drift. Perhaps this is why the idea of Planet 9 belongs so naturally inside a bedtime story, because it offers a version of the universe where mystery is soft, where distance is protective, and where unseen things can still feel trustworthy. And as you float through this relaxing story, you may picture that hidden world as a large and quiet companion to the sun, perhaps wrapped in cold layers of atmosphere, perhaps holding old internal warmth deep below, perhaps gliding through the dark with the serenity of a world that has long ago accepted the pace of eternity. And around it, the outer solar system seems less like emptiness and more like a broad sleeping ocean, with tiny icy bodies drifting like pale shells upon slow currents, each one tracing a long ellipse through the calm, each one moving in a way that may, ever so slightly, reflect the presence of something larger and farther away. And there is something deeply soothing in that arrangement, because it reminds you that even at the edge of the known, there is still pattern, still relation, still the soft geometry of gravity keeping company with distant things. Imagine now that the sky in the realm of Planet 9 is almost always a kind of endless twilight, not the warm twilight of evening on Earth, but a far colder and more delicate version where sunlight arrives after such a long journey that it feels less like illumination and more like a gentle suggestion, a silver hush laid lightly across the upper dark. And under that faint, distant light, the hidden planet continues onward, never hurrying, never straining, only turning through the ages as steadily as breathing in sleep. This nighttime story asks you to follow that steadiness now, to let your own thoughts lengthen into wider and quieter curves, to stop holding them too closely, and to allow them to move as remote objects move beyond Neptune, slowly enough that motion becomes peace and repetition becomes comfort. Perhaps one of the most beautiful things about Planet 9 is that it has not yet been fully seen, because that means the solar system still contains a little untouched softness, a final quiet room at the edge of its great house, and you do not need to open that room tonight. You only need to rest near its doorway, feeling the calm of what may be there, the vastness of what remains unsaid, the strange and tender reassurance that not every mystery is meant to excite you, because some mysteries are meant to soothe you, to hold the mind in a loose and gentle way, until waking thought begins to thin like mist. And if your thoughts wander, let them wander kindly, because wandering is part of this story too, part of Planet 9's imagined nature, part of the long, slow poetry of a world that may have traveled outward long ago and found its home in remoteness, not lost, not forgotten, only far away, circling faithfully beneath the farthest stars, while the known planets remain behind like old lamps seen across a great dark field. Even the cold out there can be imagined gently now, not sharp or bitter, but smooth and ancient, a cold so deep that it has become quiet, a cold that wraps the hidden planet in stillness the way your blanket wraps around you here. And the farther you listen, the more the outer solar system becomes a place of rest rather than distance, a place where the mind can loosen and settle, because everything within it has already slowed to the pace of deep sleep. Picture the little sun once more as a small golden point far beyond, and between that tiny warmth and this imagined distant world stretches an ocean of silence so broad that every worry seems smaller inside it, every unfinished task more harmless, every bright edge of the day more easily softened. And perhaps that is the greatest comfort Planet 9 offers in a gentle bedtime like this one. That scale itself can be calming, that vastness can be tender, and that the universe, when heard in a whisper, can lull you more sweetly than certainty ever could. So remain here for a little while longer, floating beside the long sleep of the outer sea, where the hidden planet keeps its unseen orbit, where the icy frontier glimmers faintly beneath patient stars, and where your own breathing can become part of the same quiet rhythm, slower now, softer now, farther from effort, farther from wakefulness, until this sleep story is no longer something you are following, but something you are resting inside, a slow and endless drift through the serene outskirts of the solar system, where Planet 9 moves with perfect calm and carries you gently, almost imperceptibly, toward deep sleep. And now, dear listener, this sleep story reaches its softest shore, not with an ending that arrives suddenly, but with a long and gentle fading, like the last silver trace of light on a calm horizon. And as we rest together in the imagined realm of Planet 9, far beyond Neptune, far beyond the bright, familiar rooms of the solar system, you may let everything become quieter still, because there is nothing more to follow closely now, nothing more to hold on to, only the deep and peaceful feeling of a hidden world continuing its patient journey through the outer dark, while you are carried slowly toward rest. Perhaps Planet 9 is still there in the great distance, moving with ancient calm beneath the farthest stars, wrapped in blue-black twilight, touched only faintly by the small and faraway sun. And perhaps that is the most soothing image of all for this gentle bedtime, that somewhere in the silent reaches of space, a world may be gliding onward without hurry, without strain, without ever needing to arrive. And as you imagine that unseen orbit now, broad and graceful, and almost too slow to feel, you may allow your own thoughts to move in the same way, widening, dimming, drifting outward, until each one becomes soft as frost and light as starlight on the edge of a dream. All around that hidden planet, the outer solar system lies open like a vast sleeping sea, calm and undisturbed, with icy wanderers scattered across the darkness like pale shells resting on black water, each one held in its own quiet path, each one turning in the slow and faithful language of gravity. And there is such peace in that language tonight, because it asks nothing from you, demands nothing, proves nothing. It only carries, only guides, only holds. And so this relaxing story can become lighter now, gentler now, as though even the words themselves are beginning to fall asleep. Perhaps the little sun, seen from that unimaginable distance, is no more than a bright pin of warmth stitched into velvet. And perhaps Planet 9 circles it so slowly that whole ages pass like drifting dust, while here, in the softness of your own room, the same slowness is becoming a comfort to you, reminding you that not everything must be completed, not every mystery must be solved, not every thought must be followed to its end before sleep is allowed to come. Instead, you may simply float, as the hidden world floats, held by a larger order, carried by a motion so patient it becomes indistinguishable from stillness. And if one last waking thought rises now, let it rise gently and pass gently, the way a distant icy object might pass through the outer dark, quiet and untroubled, never disturbing the great hush around it. This nighttime story has no sharp edge at its close, only a gradual softening, only the sense that the cosmos itself is dimming its lamps one by one, leaving the farthest reaches wrapped in tender shadow, while Planet 9 remains what it has always been in this bedtime journey, a peaceful possibility, a hidden companion, a slow and silent lantern beyond the known. And that is enough, more than enough, for the tired mind, because some of the most beautiful things do not need to appear clearly in order to comfort us. They only need to remain near the edge of feeling, glowing faintly, asking us to rest rather than understand. And so the solar system stretches out around you now in one final hush, the inner planets impossibly far behind, Neptune only a memory, the Kuiper Belt quiet, the stars steady, and ahead of all thought, the imagined path of Planet 9 continues in a curve so calm it seems to cradle the darkness itself. And as that curve goes on and on, your breathing may grow slower, your body heavier, your mind softer, until even the image of the hidden planet begins to blur into pure atmosphere, into stillness, into the soothing sense of distance, without loneliness and silence, without emptiness. Maybe that is what has been most restful all along. Not just the facts of a possible distant world, not just the science of faint clues and faraway orbits, but the feeling that the universe can still contain something patient, something quiet, something unresolved in a way that is gentle rather than restless. And now that gentleness can fold around you completely, like the dark around Planet 9, like the silence between stars, like a blanket drawn slowly and carefully to the chin. There is no need now to picture details, no need to keep the story bright, no need to stay at the doorway of thought, because the outer sea has grown so calm, the distant sun so small, the hidden orbit so slow, that the whole journey has become a lullaby made of space and time, a calming narration that no longer leads you forward, but simply rocks you where you are, in the perfect quiet between wakefulness and dreams. And if Planet 9 continues onward tonight, as it does in the imagination, then let it continue without you needing to watch. Let it turn in peace while you do the same, while you sink a little deeper, drift a little farther, and soften a little more into that deep sleep, waiting patiently beneath every word, beneath every star, beneath the last fading glimmer of the faraway sun, until the hidden world is only a hush in the dark, and the dark is only comfort, and comfort is all that remains.